Thank you for joining us on the Going Deeper podcast, a ministry of Fathom Church in Littleton, Colorado. You will never get to the bottom of the depths that are in Christ for you. And our hope with this podcast is that it will help you go deeper with God. So let's dive into this episode of the Going Deeper podcast. What's up, everyone? This is your host, Kyle Knight. Welcome to the Going Deeper podcast, a podcast where we like to have conversations, hopefully to help you go deeper in your relationship with God. I'm in the podcast studio with our very own missions and events minister, Karina Bost. Hi, Karina.
Hello.
And our lead pastor, Chris Martin. Hi, Chris.
Hey,
we're talking about work.
we are
This episode, we're
working.
talking about work.
Hey guys, we're at work right now.
We're at
Talking
work.
about work at work.
Ooh,
This is it's
Mind blown.
like a mind vortex in here. Yeah.
Inception sort of thing. Chris, why are we talking about work?
Because we're at work. That's true. That's true.
Yep.
Actually, that's exactly why we're talking about work. Because this is our jobs, guys.
Mm.
But this is not the job of the hundreds of people who call Fathom their home church. And I think the question for us in ministry is, oh gosh, yeah, of course I see the purpose
Right.
in my work. Of course I see what God is doing through my work. It really makes a lot of sense when you're vocationally paid. Your vocation is ministry or missions or nonprofit or something but that's a very myopic view of work. And for most of our church, their work is in the marketplace.
Mhm.
They work in the world. And I don't want to get too secular sacred divide here, but there really isn't biblically that idea that like farming or, building something or being an architect or something like that is any less important God-fearing work as a priesthood or being a shepherd or something like that. So I'd like to talk about work because I think people think, oh, well, you know what? I'm just working for the weekend, or I'm just working for a paycheck, or this is just a necessary evil, or I'm just here to earn. I'm just here to provide. I'd like to talk about work because it's something that most of our people are going to spend a huge amount of time and energy and effort in their life on. And I want them to understand biblically that there's actually purpose in all work. So that's what I think when we're talking about work. And man, there's a million different places we could go with this, but let's talk about biblical work. What is the biblical theology of work? How can we encourage most of our church members who don't work in vocational ministry, that kind of stuff? So, Karina, when you think about work, what comes to mind for you from a Christian perspective?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning of creation, you can clearly see that God made us for work. In Genesis 1:28, it says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the seas and the birds of the air and every creature that moves on the ground. And later he tells them to cultivate the gardens, but we are created for work from the very beginning.
Yeah. That's called the cultural mandate. Okay. And that's like big deal theology. Okay. That's a huge deal theology. We don't have time to get into all of that, but God now note, this is before Genesis chapter 3. This is before sin entered the cosmos. Okay. So
work was good.
before sin, we had a job to do. We had a family to cultivate. We had ground to work. We had animals to subdue. We had domain to take care of. We were co-creators. He doesn't say just take care of this thing. He says cultivate it, build it. The garden was never meant to just be like, hey, hang out in the garden and stay in the garden and eat fruit in the garden and just like walk around naked in the garden. Now it was like, get sweaty, get dirty, build some stuff. And that's before sin. And I think that I remember the first time I thought of that, like the first time I heard that preached and 20 years ago, hearing that blew my mind. That work came before the fall. Now, ask anybody going to work on Monday whether they believe that or not. They may or may not believe that because work has been affected by the fall. So, Kyle, let me ask that question to you. Like, how has sin affected work?
Yeah, I really do think, and I mean, I made a little joke about it, but I really do think that a lot of people think like work is a punishment. Like work is a bad deal. Like I have to go to work. I have to do that. And in all fairness, I think like for the majority of like our culture here is that it's kind of portrayed in that way of like, yeah, you got to get a job and you probably won't like it. You just got to do it every single day. And it's almost, I don't want to say like praised or whatever when it's like not good stuff. Like it's like people talk about how crappy their job is and everything like that. And it's almost like a badge of honor or whatever to have on them, that it's just like, yeah, work was hard, work was this. And it's like, I feel like in today's culture, we have that view of work that it's like, even just saying that word almost sounds like, work. Like work has this negative connotation that's something I have to do. When again, before the fall, like this was like work is a gift from God. Like God gave us this gift of creation and a gift of using our skills, our like what he has blessed us with, our skills and everything, our gifts to actually do these things to honor him. I mean, there's so much scripture that talks about, hey, whatever you do it to the glory of God, do it to honor God. And so I think in today's world, it's kind of gotten to a point where it's like I can't be happy in my job. Like work isn't a place to be happy. You just kind of do it. You do it to get money, to better yourself and better your life and stuff. And we do forget, Chris, that it's like, yeah, like this was supposed to be like meant to be really, really good and good. And that's hard to say again. And I think you're right, Chris, of like, man, the majority of my almost all of my working adult life has been working in a church, in ministry. And so it's hard to think outside of that kind of work box. But so I know there's some people sitting there going, well, you don't know my job. You don't know my work. You don't know the people I work with. You don't know the stuff I have to do. I don't see it as that. And I think that makes it really hard, and understandably so. It makes it hard to think like, hey, that's a gift.
Well, and this is, we can call a spade and say work did change after Genesis 3. Mm-hmm. Like after the fall, here's the curse of Adam. Okay. Genesis 3:17, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Now remember, the cultural mandate was work the ground, cultivate the ground. Well, now it's cursed because of Adam. In pain, you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Good grief.
So
I don't like work now.
So now hear me. I mean, I would never use the C word like Kyle used. Yeah. But if you hate your job, if you think your job is the worst, you can blame Adam. I mean, you can, but on a larger scale, you can blame sin. Sin has caused work to be changed from a joyful, life-giving, co-creating with the Father expression of cultural dominion, and has turned it into thorns and thistles and toil and labor. Yeah. And that's different. Now, there is redemption for work, just like there is redemption for the ground, and there is redemption for humanity, but there is also redemption for work. So let's talk a little bit about kind of like the Christian perspective on work then. Even if you hate it, even if you hate it, Monday morning, you get a case of the Mondays. What's the Christian perspective for a job, for a career, for work?
I think one of the things that I just kind of a small thing that I would always think of. And especially when like, it kind of goes back to, I'm thinking of my, one of my previous jobs when I wasn't in ministry working in a church, and how hard that is to do the like day in and day out, Monday morning, going to work, and really like believing like I'm doing this for God. God has me here. But it was and the job I'm thinking of was just out of college. It was a construction job. So it was super hard, super difficult labor work. And boy, that was an environment that even the people that I worked with, where it would be really difficult for me to convince myself or be convinced that like, oh man, this is where God wants me, and this is the job that he has me doing now. And like, I like what I'm doing here is honoring to God, because it's hard to think, oh, like I'm digging holes. This is honoring to God. But one of the easiest things that kind of kept me going through it is that it's like, yeah, in some way, I don't know how this is honoring to God. I know how it is, but I'm going to do my best. It's that, I think, Colossians verse of like work heartily, like whatever you do, like work heartily for the Lord, like do it with all your heart. Because then it does make you think and go back to like, hey, like I have this opportunity, like I'm at least able to work. I think a big thing is to kind of count those blessings and be like, you know what, I have a job. I'm able to do this kind of work, and God has had me in this situation, even if it's really hard to think about how this might be honoring to God.
What do you think, Karina?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're just caught up in working for your paycheck, it's going to become really draining. I think if you just think you're just working to pay bills and to, like you said, make it to the weekend so you can do the real pieces of life, you're kind of missing, which it's your work that we're called to do. And I don't really know. I mean, if you hate your job, what lets you that? Sometimes we get into a position and we're like, this is the only job and I'm stuck here because of the pay, whatever. But God has you there for a reason, which I know sounds super cliche, but we are called to glorify him. And like Kyle said in Colossians 3:23, that's a verse he keeps quoting, but we are called to work. And so if you're doing your job and, like, you should do it to the best of your ability because it glorifies God and it honors his name.
Yeah.
If you're a believer, that's the stance you should have.
So like Martin Luther has this whole theology of work that I think is really, really helpful to talk about, where he uses this illustration of like a woman washing dishes. And the whole idea is that any less spiritual than a monk or a priest or, whatever? And he would say, no, that you can, and maybe the way to think of it is work as worship. And not worship like, I'm singing on Sunday with Amanda leading word. Like worship is a response to what God has done for you. It's a response with your whole self. And so sometimes that involves singing. You see what God has done for you. You hear what God has done for you. You experience what he has done for you, and you respond in song, or you respond in generosity, or you respond in fill in the blank. But one idea is, what if you respond to all that God has done for you in work? Like, what if you looked at your work as a gifted response to the Lord? And that's the idea there, that you can be washing dishes or scrubbing toilets or cleaning floors or changing diapers or building skyscrapers or managing hedge funds or teaching children or preaching sermons. And you can do it out of a place where God has blessed you. God has saved you. God has rescued you. He's transferred you from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of his beloved Son. And therefore, Colossians 3, I can work as unto the Lord. Like, so work as worship, I think, is the perspective, the lens that we want to frame up our work. So you're like, I hate my job. I have to go to McDonald's. I've done this, right? I have to go to McDonald's and flip burgers and take orders and clean ball pits. Like, that's what I have to do for my job. How is this possibly honoring to God? And listen, you might not be able to share your faith with your coworkers. Man, you might not be able to lead somebody to Christ. You might not feel like there's any spiritual thing, but here's what I can say. You are a representation of God there in how you work, in how you talk, in how you do or don't complain, in how you encourage. You do have relationships there. You do have onlookers, who are watching you. You can work with integrity. You can work with pride. You can do your very best working as unto the Lord, like as if you were working for God. But let's just say you're in a job where you're not with anybody. You don't have any sort of interactions. Like it's just like you and you're picking up trash on a highway, a deserted highway, and that's your job. Hear me. You can still worship God for the breath in your lungs, for the legs that are carrying you, for the finances that he is providing, for the way that the means that he is providing, for the wind, for the air, for the world, for the land. Like you can worship him in your work. And that is how I think the Christian postures their heart. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of that feels pretty like pie in the sky. So let's zoom back in then to you work at McDonald's and you hate it. Okay. Here's the message from your pastor. Quit. Now, yes. I mean, and I'm speaking to the people of Fathom, okay? Yeah, because this is not what I would say universally applies. If you're in a different country where work is a different thing and you're just trying to survive, man, maybe think twice about that. But I don't think that person hates their job. When you're trying to survive, you are thankful for any sort of work. So I think it is a first world problem to hate our jobs at some level, to seek fulfillment from our jobs, which, by the way, is a problem in and of itself. And we could do a whole podcast on that. Yeah. But listen, welcome to the United States of America. Quit. Some people are like, I hate my job. Then quit. Well, how will I make money? By getting another job. Well, I love the money that I'm making at this job. Then don't quit and shut up. Right? Like, I mean, at some level, there's some pragmatics
said
here.
The S word.
The S word. Never the C word, but the S word. But like, that's what I'm like, at some level, it's like, stop talking about it. Change your career, change your job. If you hate it so much, change it. But don't think that the grass is greener just because you're changing your vocation. Okay. Work as worship should transcend whatever you're doing. Because I'll tell you this much, there are some times where it's hard work for me to write a sermon, to read God's word and to write a sermon feels like toil. It feels like thorns and thistles sometimes. It doesn't matter how, quote, spiritual or awesome your job environment. Like, I think working for our church, well, I started our church, but I like it. You guys don't have to agree with me. All right. We'll deal with this off mic.
Me and
we'll deal with this off mic. They're rolling their eyes at me, people. But listen, I like my job. And there's times where it's toil. There's times where it's labor, where it's thorns and thistles, where it's affected by the fall. So I'm just telling you, church, if you hate your job, you're going to hate your next job. Because it's not just a change of your job that is going to change your countenance, your heart. It's actually seeing work differently that will change you. And then listen, quit your job that you hate and go find one that you like a little bit more, but worship God in that work. That's what I'd say on those, because golly, there's work to be done in all fields in this world. I mean, you are pushing back darkness as you work unto the Lord. It's a spiritual work. You could be spiritual in your work at McDonald's. Yeah. Flip those burgers.
Yeah. And I honestly wish when I was younger, having those kind of jobs that I kind of hated, that I had that perspective on it, like more of a perspective of even though this isn't my ideal job and it might not be perfect, but to like, I feel like looking back now, I could have liked my job more and found a little bit more like fulfillment in not doing that work, but doing it for God and how God had me there. And I think changing that perspective could really help some people, even if they have a bad job now. So I think that's super important. Karina, do you have any last little words to add with work?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking, we talked about work starting in the beginning and it being affected by the curse, but there's like the new heaven and the new earth to look forward to, where work will be restored. I mean, once again, we're entering into work. In the new earth, we will be working.
Right.
And so it's just kind of the bookends, but I think it should give us hope in our work now, that we can still work and that it's still what we're called to do.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think that's something we miss, that like the end of the story isn't back to the garden.
Right.
The end of the story is in a city where, it's a new heavens and a new earth, and there's jobs to be done. We're not, when we've been there 10,000 days, sitting on clouds, playing harps, singing, Amazing Grace. That's not heaven.
Yeah.
It sounds like hell for some, right? Like
burgers and McDonald's.
But there's work. There's good, godly, redeemed work. And I don't even know what that, I can't even, we cannot fathom these things. And yet, like, God says there's good stuff for us for all of eternity, ever increasing joy, ever increasing pleasure, ever increasing satisfaction in the work that God has for us. We are co-laborers with Christ. Love it. I love it.
Love it.
So go get a job.
Get to work. Get to work, church. Thank you guys for this conversation. Hey, church, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.